to these kinds of learning
Dipakai ujian ini.
dynamics or uncertain processes in STEM process. So, teach types of authentic problems in STEM lessons. And each problem requires diverse interdisciplinary knowledge and skills. So teachers also need to support multiple solution paths because each group of students has their own solution. So from the teacher side, from the teacher perspective, these students' learning dynamic and uncertain nature of STEM problems can raise the key questions. How to support and guide these kinds of dynamic and uncertain situations during students' STEM practices. To guide students' STEM practices efficiently, various kinds of pedagogical model, instructional model were suggested by STEM educators. Let us see these three representative models. So the first model, suggested by B, emphasized that how students actively draw on and integrate the four different disciplines such as science, technologies, engineering, and mathematics around the central problem situations. And this model highlights the reciprocal connections among the disciplines as students apply knowledge to solve authentic and real-world problems. Meanwhile, the second model, suggested by Kelly and Knowles, this framework clarifies the roles of each discipline. So, science for inquiry, engineering for design, mathematical thinking, and technological skill. And the last model was suggested by the Singapore scholars Prof. Eng Minh Tang, in our research team. And this model clarifies that STEM problem
Petri Priyatni oleh admin ya. Aku kan nggak tahu kan nomor urut berapa.
And these phases are cyclical process. So from identifying a problem and understanding a problem to the formulating and implementing
nomor urut 1 ruang 4
and revising solutions.
Yang ganti nama aku tuh ini admin loh, bukan aku. Oh, otomatis.
It visualizes the strength of the connection among STEM domains.
_11. Aku juga baru tahu nomor urut 11.
That different problem may require stronger or weaker interdisciplinary links depending on the problem. And every three model can clearly answer how to guide students' STEM practices with the unique affordances. However, all of them begin from the designer perspective, educator's perspective. So they could be a bit limited to answer how to manage these kinds of dynamics and uncertain situations from the bottom-up perspective. So this particular research sought to offer some insights how to manage learning dynamics from the ground level, from the actual classroom situation. So this research adapted the bottom-up from the ground level, and we examined what was emphasized in actual STEM classroom settings to support students' dynamic nature of STEM practices. So during STEM problem solving, we analyzed what teachers focused on to manage these dynamic situations and how teachers navigated the dynamic processes. Specifically, to identify these dynamic features, we adopt the perspective of epistemic norms. I think this concept would be very new to you. So this perspective norms effectively reveals what kinds of supports by highlighting what are emphasized in the classroom and why they are emphasized and how these emphases affect students' learning. So based on this theoretical perspective, we addressed the following questions. So firstly, what norms, epistemic norms, are formed in integrated STEM problem solving? And how do these norms have an influence on the STEM problem solving of students? As a theoretical foundation, let me introduce what is norms in education. The concept of norms was originated from the social cultural perspective of learning developed by Vygotsky. According to his theory, learning always occurs through meaningful social interactions. In this sense, several social factors need to be considered to understand student learning. For example, teachers believe on learning, and students' belief or students' attitude and interest on learning can influence their learning at the individual level. At the same time, classroom culture or classroom environment, social relationship between students, and even assessment system can influence student learning at the social level. And the perspective of norms can capture these two different levels of factors, individual level and social level, together to find the feature of student learning. Specifically, this study defined norm as specific behavior patterns that was emphasized as a desirable way in behavior in STEM classrooms. So to define and capture the norm, we extracted three essential features of norm. There are three features to define norm. First, every norm has justifiability. There are something emphasized to students. Second, these norms should be shared in a community. Third, the norms guide concrete behavior. It makes member students to act in a specific way. So, epistemic norms in this study refers to shared epistemic criteria as a desirable and good way for defining a problem, generating and elaborating the solutions, and testing and revising prototypes in STEM problem solving. Okay, so this study was conducted as a part of 3-year big project led by Professor Theo Tangi. And this project aimed at the developing students' STEM capacity. Specifically, it focuses on the second event within the project, a 10-week STEM initiative implemented across 3 secondary schools. So the participants included the 37 students and 7 instructors, so we co-teaching together, and teaching assistants as well. And all 7 instructors were STEM experts who delivered the STEM-related lectures or conducted the STEM research. So 7 instructors taught 37 students, consisting of 10 groups. And we collected the data, students' worksheet, and e-portfolio, such as Padlet, and several versions of students-generated model and final prototype. And in the instructor side, we also collect the teaching resources and field notes, researchers' field notes, and group chat among instructors. And these kinds of various data were collected and analyzed together. So let me introduce how I analyze the data and how I extract the norms. So for example, this is one set open, okay? And one entire lesson was partitioned into the discrete small activity. Okay, and in each activity, we analyze two aspects. So, the phase of STEM problem solving and what is emphasized in this activity. So, for example, in this activity, the instructor talked about how to define a STEM problem. So she guided students to create a STEM problem from real life situations, real life very inconvenient situation. As you can see in the picture, it's a very food. Student can see the food wastage, right? So we extracted, and the instructor emphasized that many problems can occur in our daily life, and in real life, these inconvenient situations can be the starting point to define the STEM problem. So in this activity, we extracted defining a real-world useful problem as an emphasized idea. And at the same time, this idea, emphasized by the instructor, was also observed again in other sets of data such as classroom discussions or e-portfolio. So at the end of the data analysis review, for example, a student also said that STEM problems should be very useful to the target user. Yeah. And they also explain that their problems are very good because it can help reduce the food wastage problem in Singapore. So after the end of the data analysis, we reviewed each norm with three different criteria: justifiability, what is emphasized, and how these ideas were shared, and how the norms make students act in a specific way. So in this way, we discover the norms in STEM classrooms. Okay, so let me introduce the results. So consequently, we found the three main norms in each phase of STEM problem. So let me introduce each of them. The first norm is define a real-world useful and accessible problem. So in the early stage of the lesson, the instructor guided students to define their STEM problem from the real world inconvenient situations, as I introduced before. And the instructors show the inconvenient situation, as shown in the picture, and which can be the starting point to identify STEM problem. And based on this explanation, students that identify problems. These are the problems generated by students at the first time. So they said, finding efficient methods of food consumption to reduce food waste. And another group generate the problem, transportation system for the blind. So what do you think? Do you think that these two problems are good STEM problem? Both of them were generated from the real life, daily life inconvenience situation, right? However, many instructors pointed out that they are too vague and too broad for students to control, right? So instructors commented as follows: the students' initial ideas are still raw and vague and too complex or broad problems, so they need to choose a specific part or they need to narrow down. So when you guide STEM problems in your classroom with your students, you need to narrow down the topic or scope of the STEM problem that can manageable for students as well as you, teachers. And to make these problems more useful and accessible, manageable, the instructors started to use this writing frame as a pedagogical tool, instructional, educational tool. So it says, how might we design or create something for the target user for the elderly or for the Singapore people or Indonesian people, students and so on, in order to resolve the pain points or elevating the experience, right? So students are required to fill in the each blank. And this frame allows students to narrow down their ideas, what they will design, and who will be their target users, and concretize the usefulness of a problem. In this sense, this frame worked as an epistemic scaffold in defining STEM problems. As my first norm, this idea started to change and influence students' ways of thinking and doing in their STEM project. So for example, in the left side of the photo, the students describe their problems very concretely. So in this group, they developed the sleeping pod in the school library to take a rest. When the students describe their problem like this, so the sleep deprivation is very major issue for Singaporean teenagers, and they show the data how sleep is important and how Singapore students are very tired and exhausted. And their target users are students who study hard and may feel they're very exhausted and tired in the library. So compared to the previous one, their problems and target users and situations are very critical.
Tapi dia aja belum mulai.
Most of this norm. So the discussion was a part of the peer feedback, and in this classroom discussion, the students explained that a good STEM problem should be very useful to the target user. In this case, the elderly, the older people are their target user, as they have a seat to sit on, and issue they might face in their country. At the same time, they need to consider the accessibility of the problem. So they said that in creating the problem, they need to consider the users, location, functions, and accessibility. And they emphasize, the students emphasize that it is also important to consider
Oh iya ya, kamu ke sekolah pas lah jangan pikir
this project. Right? So in this way, we can see that the norms define a real-world useful and accessible problem influence the student learning process in their STEM project.
Iya.
Move on to
Biasa
the
aja
next
mereka
phase of
datang aja pas kita tempat Pak Des kemarin sama pas ini.
STEM project,
Kita aja jangan enggak.
When students
Nggak enak
generate
buat seolah datang
the
istilahnya
idea
cuma dapat makan. Kan mereka biasa aja datang makan itu nggak ada yang ngasih kemarin.
And concrete model.
Here
is an example from the group 1 in school A.
Orang dia baru datang, malah posting itu. Sibuk nelponin aku video call.
So they said that our sleeping pod should be safe and comfortable, and it should be relaxed. However, when the instructors asked students, "Can you show your design?" But they were very hesitant because at the early stage, students cannot have very concrete and perfect idea in their mind, right? They are still progressing. So this would be the uncertain moment in designing a solution. They don't know the answer, right? So we observed that their initial design were very vague, and this usually described and explained in verbal way. So designing a new model was very
Iya kah? Nggak tahu.
challenging for new
acaranya Pak itu
The
sendiri,
emphasis
itu acara mereka kan hari
took
Kamis.
The
Di grup kan
first
dia ngomong
thing
hari Kamis
is
pertemuan
that
FGD. Yang dia omongin Pak Desri kemarin dengan
other
UNES, ada
existing
Proforo,
sleeping pods,
ada ini.
right? So in the world there are
itu
so
kan
many kinds
acaranya,
of sleeping pods.
Katalis.
So they need to
Acaranya
research
Katalis, yang kata
what
Pak Munzi
have
dengan UNES.
developed so far.
Saya besok dengan
And
Ines.
secondly, however, they
Oh,
do
sama
not
ini.
just
Oh,
copy
dia
and
ngomong di
paste,
rapat
right?
kemarin.
They need
Pak,
to
nanti pasti datang hari
change
Kamis. Dah.
and
Pak,
customize
saya belum
the
bisa kali.
existing design depending on
Pak,
their
saya baru
target
bisa ikut
users,
rapat hari Kamis. Tapi
right?
dia masuk timnya Pak
However,
Muzil.
sample size,
Pak Muzil nggak
so
pelit uang.
students start to find and research about the existing spinning part, key difference, right? And another way to
Iya, ini mereka acaranya di sini. Emang sekalian ICOSE Rombongan Amli ya? Nggak tahu. Iya, gedung depan ini Universitas Negeri Malang. Iya, di situ fotonya. Berarti rombongan mobil ini ya? Ini ya? Apa yang mana ya? Yang rombongan kayak besar, kayak HIC, kayak SAA yang besar. Nah, itu mobil-mobil besar sana. Iya, foto di sini. Ini nah acara apa ya? Pingkan kita foto di situ. Dari Universitas PGRI ini masih Bu. Nah, ya, Universitas Akademika. Ada gini. Ya, yang benar pentar tuh. Daratnya tuh. Iya.
setup and design greater in detail. Here is another example to show how to concretize students' design. This group wanted to design an equipment to convert MRT subway noise into electricity. You know, when you use the MRT, there are so many, it is very noisy. So this student wants to convert this sound energy into the electrical energy. So their project
kan undangannya yang kukirim ke grup itu gedung apa tuh ini lantai 2 apa gitu 211 212
in verbal way like this. So although we would like to find a way to reduce noise pollution at the MRT station. So it is not concrete, right? Verbally explained. So this group didn't know what steps.
FGD lagi mereka lanjut perjalanan keliling ke kabupaten lain ngumpuli data penelitian. Banyuwangi besar dana penelitian gitu ratusan juta.
So to support this
belum ya. Mana ada ibu? Belum. Iya, belum. Pak, Pak saya dari sini.
Recording in progress. To sound vibration and understand how to convert. So they need to learn the scientific and engineering.
baru mulai Bu.
And secondly, they will guide you
mau motoin dulu. Tak foto guys.
Visualize their idea. And they can criticize their idea when they necessary material. So we ask students to write down what kinds of materials they need to make their design.
Selfie yuk.
Ways
Aku tuh punya yuk.
make their
Udah setengah pada ngecek.
and this note
Kondisi adik ya masih. Sini selfie sih.
influence students' ways of
Kondisi adik. Ya,
ask students what are the features of good
ini kayak gimana nanti
and
kita
they
kesini lagi.
answer students' answer